Ever think about what it means for an African-American woman to just be sitting quietly and suddenly she'd a problem? Especially when her spouse is a high-ranking admiral. Eleanor Vance had about 12 unread messages, maybe 3 missed alerts, but only a single deep breath left in her. She wasn't just tired. This tiny sliver of the afternoon, this was hers. It was around 2:15 p.m. in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. Eleanor was under a big maple tree in Willow Creek Park. Her laptop bag sat next to her, the tablet beside it still a bit warm. She'd just finished a video conference from her car. She looked put together, crisp shirt, dark trousers, sensible flats, her hair in a neat bun that had battled the muggy air all day. Professional, steady, calm. That was Eleanor. She wasn't making a scene, just sitting there thinking, feeling the sunlight dappling through the leaves onto her skin. Her home wasn't right in this particular spot, but not too far, just a short drive away. She ran a community health center, married with 3 kids, the type who always takes the shopping cart back and checks work emails on Saturdays. She just wanted a moment to herself, to unwind before hitting the traffic. Maybe sip the last of her iced tea. No loud noise. Not on her phone, just a woman on a park bench trying to catch a moment. A gray minivan drove past, really slowly, in the background. Eleanor glanced up, didn't give it a second thought. Parks are for everyone, right? But she couldn't see the driver of that minivan. A woman, probably late 50s, pulled over by the curb on her phone just watching Eleanor. Inside, the woman was saying, "I'm not sure, she's just sitting there. Doesn't look like she fits in around here. Probably nothing, but it feels off." Then she added, "She keeps looking around like she's casing the houses or something." The emergency operator on the other end just said flatly, "All right, ma'am, we'll dispatch a unit to investigate." Back on her bench, Eleanor was going over notes for the next day's committee session. She tapped her tablet screen, making a quick change, her mind already wrestling with how to fund that new children's unit by the third quarter. That's when she saw a squad car turn into the parking area, and then another one right behind it. 2 officers got out. One fiddled with his belt. The other was sort of squinting her way. Eleanor looked up, half expecting a nod, a simple hello, but they weren't smiling. No wave, nothing. They walked straight for her, like they were on a mission. One officer's hand was resting near his weapon. The other clutched a radio. Eleanor blinked. Not scared, not then. Just what was going on? "Afternoon, ma'am," the taller one said. "Hello," Eleanor answered, trying to keep it light, but feeling a little wary. "Is there an issue?" "Mind telling us what you're doing here today?" he asked, his voice all business, no warmth. She felt a little frown crease her forehead and sat up a bit straighter. "I was just finishing some work before I drove home." "Why do you ask?" The second officer's eyes darted to her bag. "You from this neighborhood?" "I live about 25 minutes away." "Yes. Is something the matter?" The taller one took a step closer. "We had a report about someone suspicious in this area. And I fit the description?" Eleanor glanced around the quiet, empty park. "Sitting on a bench in the middle of the day is suspicious?" "Just doing our job," he replied, dodging her question. She kept her voice even. She didn't get loud. She just stated, "I'm not doing anything that breaks the law." The shorter officer managed a small, tight smile. "Ma'am, do you have any identification with you?" She started to reach for her bag, nice and slow. "Yes, it's right in—" "Stop," the taller one barked out. "Keep your hands where we can see them." Eleanor froze. Her hand just hung there, halfway to her bag, like it had committed some crime all on its own. "I was only going for my ID case," she said, her voice steady, careful. "Please stand up, ma'am, and stay calm," the officer instructed. "What? Why? Ma'am, just stand up." Eleanor looked around the park again. Still peaceful, still bright, sunshine, still deserted. But suddenly the whole scene felt like it was shrinking in on her, getting too close. As she got to her feet, though, you could just feel the mood change. It wasn't because she was any kind of danger, but because somebody somewhere had already decided she was. Eleanor rose slowly, making sure her hands were visible, just like life had taught her. No official training, just life. The officer gestured at her with a tiny flick of his wrist. "Turn around." She blinked. "I haven't done a single thing wrong." "You're not under arrest," he said, moving to stand behind her. "You're just being detained while we sort this out." She turned her head slightly, totally bewildered. Sort what out? Neither of them answered. The taller one reached out, and then she felt it. The cold steel snapped shut hard around one wrist, then the other. A bunch of teenagers across the park froze, watching. Someone jogging nearby slowed right down, their eyes fixed on what was happening. A mom quickly called her kid away from the playground, her head whipping around to look back more than once. Eleanor's bag, her tablet, her half-empty iced tea, they just sat there on the bench, like she'd vanished. Her heart was hammering, but her voice had stayed surprisingly level. Officers, there's been a mistake. I'm in healthcare. My credentials are in my bag. There's no reason for this. You were acting suspiciously, one of them cut in, his voice low. Eleanor just looked at them. Sitting here minding my own business? That's suspicious? He didn't answer. That's silence. It said plenty. She took a slow, deep breath, her lips pressed tight. I need to make a phone call. The shorter cop glanced at the taller one, who just kind of shrugged. Fine. On speaker, he said, tapping his own ear, making it clear. Eleanor nodded. It was awkward, hands cuffed behind her, but she managed to get her phone from her back pocket. Voice unlock, one tap. It rang just once. A deep voice, calm and carrying weight, answered. Eleanor. Her own breath caught a little. Hi, I need you to be calm, she managed. A pause, then, where are you? Willow Creek Park, she told him. They've detained me. I was on a bench. Someone called the police. Said I looked suspicious. A beat. Are you all right? Not hurt, just humiliated. The officers near her shifted, looking a bit uncomfortable now. I'm on my way, he said. Wait, she said quickly. Before you... But he was already talking over her. Put me on speaker. Eleanor looked up at the officer. He wants to be on speaker. The taller one gave a reluctant nod. She hit the button. This is Admiral Julius Vance, United States Navy. The voice boomed out from the small phone, clear and strong. You are holding my wife without any valid reason. I am en route, and this conversation is being recorded. I strongly advise you to inform your supervisor right now. You could see the two officers just freeze. The shorter one actually lowered the radio from his mouth. I will be there in 20 minutes, Admiral Vance stated. Do not move her. Do not lay another hand on her, and do not speak to her again unless I am present. Click. The line went dead. Eleanor just stared at the cops. Before I continue my story, if you like this video, please subscribe. It helps me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Thanks for your support. One of them finally cleared his throat. You probably should have mentioned who your husband was. She just blinked at him like he'd said the dumbest thing she'd ever heard. And why would that make a difference? Neither of them had a comeback for that. Because really, what could they say? The minutes crawled by. One cop started pacing back and forth. The other was on his radio, muttering about verifying ID, something about de-escalation. The whole feel of the situation had flipped. What was all cool control before now just stank of pure panic. Because Eleanor hadn't raised her voice, not once. But the man on that phone, he didn't need to. And they all knew this was about to get very, very serious. What none of them realized yet was that someone nearby was recording, and that clip was going to blow up online long before the Admiral ever showed up. The air was still, but it was that heavy kind of quiet, the kind that thrums. Everything unsaid was still being heard loud and clear. She was still standing there, those cuffs digging in. Her wrists throbbed, but it was her pride that took the bigger hit. Not because she'd done anything wrong, but because now, in all these eyes, she had. The jogger had come back around, filming from a bit of a distance. The teenagers were inching closer too. One whispered, "What did she even do?" Another just shook her head, muttering, "It's always something like this." Eleanor kept her gaze straight ahead, shoulders back. The taller officer was pacing again. The shorter one had stepped off to the side, making a show of checking his phone. You could tell they were rattled. That awful feeling when you know you've messed up big time and there's no going back. You can, sit down if you want, the tall one said, his voice suddenly softer. Eleanor just looked at him, like he hadn't just been the one to snap metal onto her wrists 10 minutes ago. No, thank you. He nodded, but it felt more like he was giving in than showing any real respect. Across the parking lot, a dark sedan slowed down. Not the Admiral, just another person watching. A woman leaned out from the passenger side, and Eleanor heard the distinct click of a camera phone. The car just drove off. This park wasn't the same place it was 10 minutes ago. Then it was a nice spot for lunch. Now, it was a scene. Whispers, videos, people guessing online. A teenager, maybe 16, wearing a hoodie, came a little closer. Phone out. "Ma'am," she asked, her voice hesitant. "Can I ask what happened? Did you?" Eleanor cut her off, gently but firmly. "I sat on a bench." The girl just blinked. "That's all? That's all." The girl looked over at the officers. You guys cuffed her for just sitting? She's not under arrest, the shorter cop said quickly. She's being detained, the girl shot back with a scoff. Yeah, well, looks pretty much the same to everyone watching. She turned away, already talking into her phone's camera. So, cops in Bloomfield Hills just cuffed this lady for sitting under a tree, said someone reported her. She wasn't even doing anything. Eleanor just closed her eyes for a brief second. Tea wasn't because she was losing it. It was because she knew what was probably next. And still, no sign of the Admiral. Then a third squad car pulled up. This one wasn't for her. Not really. It was a supervisor, Lieutenant Miller. Older, serious-looking, badge gleaming on his chest. He got out, took in the whole scene, and walked right over to the two officers. No friendly hello. What's happening here? The taller one spoke up first. We got a call. Suspicious individual. She matched the description. Miller kind of squinted. What description was that? African-American woman sitting on a bench near the houses looking around. Miller turned and his eyes swept over Eleanor, head to toe. Professional, neat, standing there with cuffs on her wrists and a quiet intensity in her eyes. He turned back to his officers. And that required handcuffs? She reached for her bag, one tried to explain. Could have been anything in there. Did she threaten you? No, but refused to give ID? Well, she was gang new, but raise her voice, curse, physically resist in any way? No, sir, but then take the cuffs off her. The officer actually hesitated. Miller's voice sharpened. I said take them off now. With fumbling fingers, the taller cop moved behind Eleanor and the cuffs clicked open. She rubbed her wrists just a little. You could see the red marks. She didn't even wince. Mrs. Vance, Lieutenant Miller said, his voice now very formal, very careful. My apologies for this. I'll be filing a full report and looking into the initial call myself. Eleanor met his gaze directly. Lieutenant, my husband is on his way. He's not going to let this go quietly. He nodded slowly. I wouldn't imagine he would. She just folded her arms, holding her ground. I want every bit of this documented. It will be. But she didn't need to say more, because right at that moment, a big, dark SUV pulled up to the curb, and the man inside was already pushing the door open. When that SUV door opened, things didn't exactly freeze, but they sure slowed down enough for everyone to feel it. Admiral Julius Vance stepped out, an imposing figure in a crisp uniform, chest full of ribbons, 4 stars on his shoulder. He had a walk that commanded attention. The teenagers across the park went dead silent. Phones that were filming seemed to droop a bit. Even the jogger, who'd been hanging around, seemed to snap to attention. Eleanor didn't react. She'd seen that walk 1,000 times. At official events, in airports, even just down the hallway at home. But this time it wasn't just her husband. This was the full force of his rank, his presence. He walked straight to her. No rush, no visible anger, just pure focus. Are you all right? He asked, his voice low. Just for her. Yes, Eleanor said. He glanced down at her wrists. They cuffed you. She just nodded once. For sitting under a tree. He turned then and looked right at Lieutenant Miller. Who's the senior officer here? Miller stepped forward. That would be me, sir. Admiral Vance looked him square in the eye. Do you have identification on the officer who put cuffs on my wife? He gestured towards the one who'd done it. I do, sir, Miller replied. Good. I'll need everything. Body cam footage, radio transmissions, the initial call log, everything. I'll be submitting a formal request via our legal affairs officer. Yes, sir, Miller said, his voice barely a breath. The 2 officers who'd cuffed Eleanor were now standing a few feet back, looking at the ground, like kids caught doing something wrong. Admiral Vance turned back to Eleanor. You have your things? She pointed to the bench, her tablet, her bag. He picked them up for her. He handed them to her gently, his hand brushing hers for a second. Then he faced the officers again. My wife is a civilian. She broke no laws. She was not a threat. The only thing she did was sit down peacefully in a public park. No one said a word. Let me be absolutely clear, the Admiral went on, his voice like a blade. You do not get to treat people this way. Not her. Not anyone. If her last name wasn't Vance, she'd probably still be in those cuffs. He let that sink in for a heavy moment. I've given 3 decades of service to a country where this kind of thing can still happen. Middle of the afternoon in a public space, he said, his eyes fixed hard on the 2 officers. You should be deeply ashamed. Lieutenant Miller cleared his throat. Sir, I can assure you this entire incident is being taken very seriously. The Admiral just shook his head. Serious is too late now. This was about basic human judgment, basic respect. You either have it or you don't. He turned to Eleanor. Ready to leave? She nodded. They walked towards the SUV, a wall of silence around them. Phones were definitely still recording. Eyes were wide. No one tried to stop them. Just before he got into the driver's seat, Admiral Vance stopped and looked back. Just one last time. To the person who made that call, he said, his voice carrying as he glanced towards the nearby houses. Hope you got a good look, because the whole country's about to see what your fear did today. Then he got in the SUV. They pulled away slowly, deliberately. But as they drove off, another vehicle was already arriving at the park. A news van. They weren't there for statements. They already had the story. The crew didn't wait for an invitation, just pulled into the lot. A reporter and her cameraman started filming what was left. Officers by their cars, Lieutenant Miller on a call, bystanders still talking in small groups. But the main story? It was already breaking online. That teenager who filmed it? She'd posted it with a quick caption, just sitting there. They cuffed her. Then her husband, a high-ranking admiral, showed up. This is our town. By the time the Vances reached their driveway, it had exploded. Nearly 500,000 views. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat, quietly rubbing her wrists. The red marks were fading, but the feeling wasn't. Julius glanced over but knew to wait until she was ready to talk. Finally, she said, her voice low, I wasn't scared out there. I was furious, then just embarrassed. But now, she shook her head slightly, now I'm just exhausted. He nodded, his eyes on the road. You don't need to explain it to me. Eleanor picked up her phone. It was blowing up. Texts, missed calls, group chats going wild. Her sister, a colleague from the health center, they'd all seen the clip. It was spreading like wildfire, not because she was famous, but because the scene itself was so painfully familiar. That image, the woman, the cuffs, the casual injustice, it struck a nerve. People had seen versions of it too many times. The evening news report was already live. Breaking now from Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. An African-American woman was detained by police earlier today in what's being called a case of mistaken suspicion. Her husband, a prominent U.S. Navy official, arrived and confronted the officers. Bystander video of the incident has since gone viral. They played the footage, Eleanor, calm and composed as the cuffs went on, the change in the officer's voice when her husband's rank was mentioned. Then, the Admiral's arrival, tall, resolute, not shouting, just present. The report then cut to a legal expert. We always ask what might happen without a camera, the analyst said. This time we saw what happened with one. It's about more than just race. It's about assumptions, power, and who automatically gets seen as credible. Within hours, hashtags were trending. #park profiling, #whyrecord. Eleanor's phone rang again. This time it was the health center's communications lead. Eleanor, I'm so sorry this happened. We absolutely stand with you. Do you want us to issue a statement? Eleanor paused. She thought of all the others who'd faced similar things without a high-ranking spouse. Without any cameras, without anyone to see. She never wanted to be a symbol, but maybe the choice wasn't hers anymore. I don't know yet, she said finally, but if I do say something, I won't be holding anything back. The woman on the line was quiet for a beat, then said softly, we'll support whatever you decide. Back in Bloomfield Hills, Lieutenant Miller was watching that same viral clip on his phone, his jaw clenched. This wasn't just going to disappear. He knew his officers had messed up badly. He made 2 hard calls that night, one to internal affairs, the other to his captain. Neither call was brief. While the department scrambled into damage control, Eleanor sat at her dining room table, starting to write something she hadn't done in years. Her own story, in her own words. By the next morning, that video had skyrocketed past 3 million views. It wasn't just the raw footage, it was the stark contrast. A composed, professional African-American woman in handcuffs on a park bench, and a 4-star admiral stepping out, not to yell, but to demand answers. Major news outlets were all over it. African-American woman detained in park. Navy admiral, husband demands accountability. Wrong place, wrong assumptions. Viral video from Bloomfield Hills. Sparks outrage. Admiral Vance's quiet fury, a masterclass in challenging injustice. Eleanor watched the coverage. It felt like a story she'd heard a million times. Only now her name was in the headlines. Her phone just kept buzzing. Advocacy groups, reporters, even some local politicians called, offering support, probably hoping for a mention if she did a press tour. She stayed silent for the moment, but the city couldn't. Lieutenant Miller faced the press at noon, his expression grim, his words carefully chosen. We acknowledged the incident yesterday involving Mrs. Eleanor Vance and two of our officers. While they were responding to what they understood to be a credible report, the situation was clearly not handled with the level of discretion and professionalism we demand. The official word was an internal investigation, officers on leave. Lieutenant Miller dodged questions about profiling, but the public wasn't waiting, and neither was Admiral Vance. Late that afternoon, he stood on his own front lawn, Eleanor by his side, facing a sea of cameras. No script, just raw truth. My wife sat on a bench, he began, his voice firm. She broke no law. She was handcuffed because someone didn't like her looks in their neighborhood. Period. He glanced at Eleanor, and she was only uncuffed because of my rank. That's not justice. The system failed her. I had to step in, and I shouldn't have. The reporters were quiet. We don't want money or private apologies, the Admiral stated clearly. We want real policy changes, public accountability, training that actually works. Eleanor then stepped forward. My job, my family, my contributions, none of that mattered on that bench. I was just a problem. Her voice was steady. This isn't about my husband's power. It's about how helpless people feel when this happens to them, alone, with no cameras, no voice was. Her words became the new soundbite. The local police quickly put up a webpage about bias training initiatives, but no one was really buying it. They had heard those promises before. What they hadn't heard was Eleanor, in her own time. Early the next morning, she posted a short video from her phone. Just her, at her kitchen table. Here's what I needed to say, the caption read. You know what hurts most? She started, looking straight into the camera. Not the cuffs, not the shame, it's that no one asked me anything before they judged me. Her voice was calm, filled with a quiet strength. I sat on a bench and I became someone to fear, simply for being there. The person who called didn't speak to me. They just called the police like I was garbage. She let that hang in the air. They didn't see a person. And when I tried to speak, I became non-compliant, a risk. My dignity only returned when my husband's uniform showed up. But what about everyone else who doesn't have that? She asked, leaning in slightly. I'm not special. I shouldn't have to be, just to be treated like a human being. The video ended. By noon, it had over 5 million views. The comments exploded. Women from all backgrounds sharing their own stories of being dismissed, doubted, or targeted. It was a flood. Then a new post appeared. A shaky video of that quiet street, that bench, a nervous voice from an anonymous but verified account. I think I was the one who called. I didn't realize. I didn't mean for any of this. I was just scared. I don't even know of what. Eleanor didn't respond to it. She didn't need to. The world was finally talking. The town officials sent an official letter the next day, didn't they? Asking for a quiet meeting with the mayor and the chief of police. Admiral Vance's reply was brief. My wife has already said everything that needed to be said. The real question is whether you're actually prepared to listen. Eleanor went back to her job at the health center the following week. She brought in some homemade cookies, ran a strategy session, even laughed at a terrible joke someone told. But things were different. People looked at her with a new kind of understanding, you know? Not pity, but respect. Like, there was the woman who'd been cuffed for nothing and still found her voice. The one who said the quiet parts out loud, who turned a simple park bench into a line in the sand without ever shouting. As for those two officers, one quietly put in his papers and left. The other got stuck on desk duty while they reviewed things. The town, of course, promised big reforms, but everyone had heard that song before. So yeah, people were rightly skeptical.